Good evening, viewers, and welcome again to Discovering Truth. And I am Pastor Forbes from Abiding Word Ministries, the Gateway in the Gambia. This is going to be the second part of our discussion on best practice nationhood dynamics. And our foundational scripture in the Bible is Daniel chapter 1, and we'll probably journey from chapter 1 through 6, picking points of scripture that are relevant to this subject on best practice dynamics for nationhood. I mean, there are a whole lot of nations that sometimes you look at and you aspire to, and some nations have made their desire to be like this other nation, that nation, because of what they see. And what they see, in short, is captured in maybe two words: best practice. And what makes the nation so prosperous, what makes the people the way they are. I have talked about my privilege to visit a particular country in Asia and interviewing a few people there in the hotel where I was and asking them would they ever want to leave their country to go to North America, and they said no. And I could tell why. But that country is almost just like our country in size and in history. But we can see that what makes them where they are today globally is because of what we call best practice. So in this series, we're seeing how we can share thoughts and ideas as to what we can do for ourselves. I am aware that between yesterday and today, 3 or 4 major things have been happening. One has been celebrating Female Genital Mutilation Eradication Day. It's like we want to put that behind us. And at the same time, there was a foundation being launched called More Than a Mother by Her Excellency the First Lady. And this morning, there is the National Development Plan being outdoored by His Excellency the President. And civil society and the press union and the whole journalism fraternity are coming together to see what we can do to enable the practicality of a Freedom of Information Act. So there's a whole lot of thing going up and down, and youth empowerment and all that. And that probably indicates to us that overall the desire is to move the nation forward away from its difficult past and just have the determination to steer it well under God to a preferred future which we all have. And I am praying and trusting that all these 3 or 4 big events that have happened in just 2 days would garner wills, breath, and life for us to see joy, particularly the one for the women and the mothers and the wives, to eradicate stigmatization, traditional bad thoughts, and just the things that make people so sad, and give the opportunity for children that are not born to be born. And who knows whether our next Einstein is actually going to be among them. So in our discussing this best practice dynamics for proper nationhood, there are a few thoughts that we will share. But let me bring you back to where we started last week in the book of Daniel in the Bible. Yes, there is a book called Daniel. It's not just somebody's name. Daniel is a book in the Bible named after a prophet. And the background of Daniel chapter 1 was that the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, Israel, then had gone into captivity by the Babylonians. The Babylonian king called Nebuchadnezzar had basically overrun Israel and took everybody into captivity. And he started sorting out, for lack of a better phrase, what would be the best for him in his spoil. And he thought about his kingdom. How can we beef up the output of this monarchy in what we do? And so let's think about the palace and the way the palace operates. We have nobles, we have chamberlains, we have eunuchs, we have servants that go up and down, waiters. And so let's recruit more. And so he calls his chief chamberlain and says, take from amongst the noble boys and my descendants and go and check around the boys from this Israeli nation and choose. But I'm going to give you criteria. And the first one was that they have to be young men in whom there is no blemish, young men who are good looking, yes, good looking, young men that are gifted in all wisdom at their age, young men who possess knowledge, they read widely, young men who are able to understand things quickly, because some things you need to be able to anticipate, preempt them, second guess them, and give answers and have options B, C, and D, so you don't wait to be told, go and try this, go and try that, go and try that. You are not being sent up and down. You are preempting scenarios. That is how people are chosen to work in security, Mossad, CIA, MI6, MI5, and places like that. Air Force pilots, airborne crews, and all that kind of thing, because you must be sharp. And such as had the ability to serve in the king's palace. So that's basic requirement. That's like the O levels. Now, for such people, they were now going to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonian people. And I said last week that whenever you can master somebody's language and their literature, chances are you've penetrated their culture, because our culture overflows into our language, the nuances, the inflections, the idioms, the way we speak, the deeper meanings, and then the literature itself tells you a lot of historics and where we want to go. And so can you imagine 15 years, 16-year-olds are being taken, and they have been handpicked from all kinds of people, and they are now going to teach them that so that they can qualify to serve in the king's palace. It's like the people who serve maybe in the foreign service or the office of the presidency. You don't want people who are leaking information, people who are stealing things they see, or people who will be taking photographs to show the world the privacy of the presidency. You don't want people like that. You want people who learn to keep their mouth quiet. I suspect that's why sometimes in certain levels of functioning you have to swear to an oath of secrecy apart from the oath of office and allegiance. And it's not just secrecy in a cultish way, but the pride of preserving and protecting what is your own. That is why certain things are encrypted in banking, encrypted in security. And so they had people like that. They had to trust them. People who can take heavy information and not go home and just leak like Swiss cheese, or just leak like a jar full of holes. They become a risk to national security. Now, the second thing was that after they had handpicked these people, remember there were 3 sets of them. There were the descendants of the king, who were Babylonians. There were noble boys born in the monarchy, who are princes all by themselves. And then there were these, for lack of a better reference, refugee boys. And they were all mixed together. And then the next thing was that they were going to train them for 3 years, that's 36 months, like a degree course in diplomacy or whatever. And they were going to start by apportioning to them well-defined food rations that the king himself ate, and also of the drink that he drank on a daily basis, as part of what they were going to use to see whether they were able to do the job. So it's almost like weighing you before an activity and weighing you after. Now, and after 3 years, they were going to have the final degree examination to qualify them to serve. We realized last week that there was an initial problem with this whole thing. The problem being that these 4 young men, who are popularly known as Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These were the 3, that was all 4 of them, that was not their original name, but the Babylonian king gave them names that he was comfortable to address them by. So the first one was called Daniel, the second one was called Shadrach, the third one was called Meshach, and the fourth one was called Abednego. So when they were the 4 chosen to mingle with the nobles and the descendants of the king, when the daily ration was brought before them, when they saw the daily ration and the drink, which was wine, they had a problem. The problem was that the daily ration did not meet their practice of faith. So it offended their conscience. And I'm grateful to know that and to note, and we must note that that king and his chamberlain eventually did not force them against their conscience. Because you see, for best practice dynamism for nationhood, the reason you chose those young foremen was because the initial criteria, they have no blemish, they are good looking, they possess knowledge, they are quick to understand, they have the ability to serve, you can teach them the literature and the knowledge, is that they pass it all. So you are seeing promise in them. So if you are seeing promise in that man or that woman, why bring them and start by offending what they hold so sacred to them? And that does not work for best nation practice. That is why most governments tend to be secular. Yes, the king, the queen, the president, the prime minister may have their personal faith, but there's got to be limits to which they can stretch it, because all the people in the realm or the country, the subjects, or in our case, the citizenry, will never share the same faith. There possibly might be a majority, but everybody has a place. That is why we are defined by our passport, our birth certificate, and not by our tribe. And for best practice, if we skew in a prejudicial or preferential way and we are biased, we could be caught in trouble, because conscience is conscience. One of the things you try not to offend in conscience. As a matter of fact, in the principles of spiritual authority and the authority of life, really, is that the first level is the imperial authority, the infallible authority of God. The second level is the veracious authority, the authority of truth. The third level is the authority of conscience. When you offend somebody's conscience, maybe you violate a woman, you rape a young girl, and you torture somebody, you lock them against their will, and you take people's property from them, you are violating their conscience. And that can cause all kinds of trouble, because, you see, what is in somebody's heart is difficult to know. I always make reference of this young man in the Bible whose half-brother raped his sister. And the sister felt so bad that she killed herself. Her name was Tamar, and his name was Ammon. And 2 years later, the brother had just been quiet, and one day he went to him and killed him. It took him 24 months of hiding. I'm so glad in our country, we are beginning to talk about truth, reconciliation, reparations, because we may have to do all that to come to the place of eventual healing, and we're trusting that that is what we will come to. And so the authority of conscience is important. Now, having said that, for people who always feel their conscience stands to be violated, offended, Daniel, as we read in chapter 1, just by his lifestyle, had come into favor with the chief chamberlain. So the first thing he told him was that, sir, we would love to participate in this exercise. We think we can do it. It's an honor for us to be chosen to work in government, work in this ministry, work here, work there. But this provision we cannot partake of because it is against the dietary laws of our faith. It doesn't mean the provision in itself is bad. It doesn't also mean that the provision was deliberately against the four boys, and I hope such things are not deliberately done to offend the consciences of people. But Daniel said that, if you want our best, if you want my best, sir, ma'am, I cannot give you my best in operating when I know that I am violating and offending my conscience. I will always have a guilty conscience in me. I may look like I am happy, but I am not happy within myself. I'm restricted, and therefore my best will not come out. And so for best practice dynamics for nationhood, when you bring people on board because you have either poached them or watched them from afar and seen their letters of recommendations from their two referees or seen their track record, the thing that attracted you to them, you don't change them from it, because when you change them, you cannot get their best. Granted, you can add value, but you don't add value in offending conscience. If anything, let them come to that place where maybe volition or out of their free will, they agree. But the good thing about this Ashpenaz was he agreed, because Daniel said that as a Jew, as a Hebrew, as an Israelite, I can undergo this exercise, but I cannot partake of this portion and of this wine. So here is my recommendation. Let us take water as an alternative, and let us take lentils or green beans. And because we all now know that after they took that, just for a 10-day testing period, they came out 10 times better. They came out fairer and better. And people today undergo that. Some people say they're undergoing what's called a Daniel fast. They just go with water and lentils for 10 days, for 20 days, and just to see the reactions in their body. And a lot of people have come out with some very gracious results for their body. Now, so this is what is happening here. Daniel says, we cannot partake of this. I can't drink this alcohol. We can't eat this thing. It's against my faith. I was brought up against this. And, you know, it's like forcing a vegetarian to eat beef, or somebody who doesn't believe in alcohol to drink it. It's violating somebody's conscience. They don't eat pork, and you want to force them. No. Because already you have lost their free will of giving you their best. And that's why one of the best practices is that we stay away from that. You know, I would always want to live in a secular nation, irrespective of how many religious practices are there, because once the government takes sides, it's a very dangerous thing. So in this kingdom, much as the man was a Babylonian king and he had his roles, the chief chamberlain said, all right, we will test you, because Daniel said, test us in 10 days. After 10 days, you just see what you do. And after 10 days, they were found better. It also means that sometimes we cannot be so bent and hell-bent on a particular method. Because here we see lentils and water outdoing the provision of the king. And I'm sure everywhere in the world, the king's provision and his drink is going to be top class. The top chefs, the top patisseries, the top bakeries, the top of everything is what they get. But here were 4 people who just said, give us water and just give us this and watch us. And so after the 10th day, when this chamberlain tested them and saw that they were fairer, they were better than the rest of the people in the group who were deliciously enjoying the king's daily provision, he said, you go ahead with what you want to do, because we need you. We need your expertise. The reason we brought you into this is because you fit the criteria of the king. So we are not going to bedevil your life and mix this whole thing and try to change you from what you are, except you willingly decide you want to do this because you see a better benefit. So that's number one. The second thing is that we must desire in our nation the best. Point 1 and 2 are almost the same, because if the best are the people who say we are not drinking, take them as the best. Don't force them to drink. If the best are the people that say this is how we are living, within the boundaries, of course, of decency and morality and national orthodoxy, but not to the whims and the caprices of one group who themselves maybe be hiding in the corner and doing the very thing that they are publicly saying they don't agree. Because when you read this story, Daniel became a leader. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were tops. In fact, the Bible says that they had an excellent spirit. They were like in the top 5 percentile of everything, yet they were refugees. So if the kingdom did not use them, the kingdom might be satisfied with what they had and be satisfied with just their experience and be clapping their hands, not knowing that they are actually being shortchanged by not tapping into better resources, because the better resources are not always what you know. The other thing about it is that when you want to do the best, you must be open-minded, because these 4 boys were Hebrews. They were Jews. They were Israelites. So they are not necessarily from your own clique and club and your own little group. No. Sometimes we look through those lenses. We look through gender. It's got to be all male. We look through, it's got to be all of this religion, all of that tribe, all of this culture. But best practice brings in the best. That's why, as I said last week, when you look at the lottery of America, Canada, and some of these countries, the lottery is not for everybody. They have criteria that they need. And by the time you pass through and you're going through all the interviews and the medics and all the things these people go through, they are literally creaming of the best of what we have, the experiential people, because they know that when you come, you're going to deliver. So if best practice is going to happen, what's going to happen? I believe it was on Sunday in America, they had the Super Bowl. And I think the Philadelphia Eagles won it. And I listened to a little clip on BBC, and I believe one of the persons who made the Eagles fly is of a West African descent. I think either his parents or his grandparents, even by his accent, you could tell, and maybe a little flavor of British accent in him. But he's not originally American. That's not his heritage. But because of best practice, because people want the best for their country, they bring in. Now, if that person maybe was brought in and was told, you can't eat your national food, you can't do that, you can't do that, then no, you are stifling the best of him coming out. Rather, leave him to the point where maybe he can say, I love my national food, but I like yours better. And so if we're thinking best practice for this new Gambia, we must go beyond party lines, beyond even the coalition talk, beyond religion, beyond tribe, beyond gender, beyond color, and look for best practice. It must not be jobs for the boys that we've shared things around. Neither must it even be political representation. You know, it's like, okay, because the percentage skew is 9-1, maybe 9 Fullers to 1 Sarahule. So everything that we do in the Gambia, wherever there is 1 Sarahule, there's going to be 9 Fullers. What if the Sarahules are better than the Fullers? What if they can deliver more? Because, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a little catchment area, and in that catchment area of, let's say, 100 people, 90 are sharp shooters, you got 90%. And if you have a catchment area of 4,000, and in that 4,000, 90 are sharp shooters, you have less than 10%. So when I look at this king, I'm amazed. He didn't say, let me put my cousin, let me put my brother, let me put my nephew, let me put my daughter's boyfriend. They were looking for people who could deliver the goods. And those people were brought in, and they served alongside other people because that kingdom wanted the best. My dear listeners, let me say to you that mediocrity will always frustrate your vision. There is never a time where mediocre thinking and living and satisfied people will take you to the top. These criterion that we read automatically disqualified a lot of people. Because to be good looking, you want to take care of yourself. To be quick to answer, you got to read, you got to think, you need to, you fight with yourself. And then your associations, you want to go around people who are thinking quick. To learn literature and history, if you've already disqualified yourself, man munuma janga, it's not everybody that can read a book. Really? Really? No. And so if in our thinking we are thinking mediocre, then we will employ mediocre, and guess what? We will have mediocre results. Mediocrity will always frustrate excellence. Mediocrity will never give us the best in our vision. And folks, whether we are doing 3 years, 2 years, 5 years, 20 years, mediocrity will never automatically metamorphose into excellence. Excellence must be a thinking, a spirit, a desire, and a zero-tolerant, non-negotiable requirement for all that we want to do in our lives. And so that must be. And the final thing I want to say is that the joy of these 4 young men, which is the next principle in best practice dynamics, is that when you are good anywhere and you are good everywhere. You know, I say this to the people in our church, you know, it's great if somebody helps you to doctor your CV, because the CV is in environmental sciences. It's one of the latest things, climate change and all that. The money is in global warming. The money is in FGM. The money is in that. So people can write a beautiful resume, a wonderful CV, and you can even have 2 referees whose qualifications are as long as the length of the A4 paper. That's fine. And maybe you skip the verbal interview because you have an uncle and a godfather. But when you come to work to deliver, if you cannot do it, you will show out. When you are bad, you're going to be bad everywhere. But if you are good and you are excellent, you will be good everywhere. These young boys were trained, and everywhere you put them, their best was going to show forth. No matter where you are, if you gave them the right conditions, you do not interfere in that which is personal to them, that which is not going to destroy their conscience, and that which is going to give them the liberty to give you their best, because they don't really have to cook benechin and bring to your house on Friday. They don't have to buy you a pair of shoes, and they don't have to hero worship you, but they're just doing the job because they have a sense of commitment to the common good of the nation, as we write in our national vision and our national anthem. Then we'll come into a best practice nationhood. And anybody who challenges them anywhere will find that these people are good. We may not like them, but we will know that they are good and we need them. My time is up. I'm going to continue next week by the grace of God. My desire is that each one of us, no matter how small the company, the school, or to the larger nation, in choosing people to work at every level, nationally or representative in international fora, we do best practice and get the Daniels, the Shadrachs, the Meshachs, the Abednego, the right people, and we make their best come forth by not offending their conscience. Until I come your way next week, by the grace of God, this is Pastor Forbes saying, have a good evening, God bless us all, and good night.